Hello. Right, let me just make this a bit bigger. Cool. Yeah, that's me. Right. Good afternoon. It is, as you can see, you can't really see in the windows behind me, but it is a gloriously grey day here in England. So why not watch something about somewhere nice and hot? Brazil, specifically Empire Brazil. Independence or Death. It is the second chapter in this series by Extra History. I actually watched the first part about 2 weeks ago on my channel, and I've really been wanting to watch the next part. Like, I normally watch extra credits like when I'm having a shit or something like that. Like, they're really good videos, so it's been killing me to watch this because I'm actually really interested in this series. It is about Brazil. Se você fala português, você pode seguir o link ao meu outro canal em português aqui or aqui somewhere. There'll be a link, but yeah. Anyway, right, without further ado, let's start watching this. Empire Brazil, Independence or Death. I'm gonna put this over here. Oh god, that's annoying. I'm gonna put this about this size. Cool. Oh yeah. So this is chapter 2. Chapter 1 was the House of Braganza moved the royal imperial capital or whatever from Lisbon to Rio de Janeiro, and with that all of the cultural institutions that come with the capital, like universities and ministerial buildings and all of that stuff is now going to be centered in Rio, which at this point was still a kind of I think they described it as a colonial port, nothing like Lisbon in the first decade of the 1800s. Yeah, and with that, it changes things because people start thinking, maybe having a non-colonial status, because also, yeah, that was it. They were expanding economic links to other countries, because typically under an imperial system, the colonies are going to have like restrictions on who they can trade with, kind of like how in the British Empire to begin with, and pretty much all empires, like Canada wasn't allowed to trade directly with Jamaica, for example. They'd all have to go via the UK and yada yada yada, whereas now it was going directly from Brazil, which is very interesting. Anyway, I'm 3 minutes into this reaction already and I haven't fucking started it, so I'm going to begin now and keep watching. Right.
Rio de Janeiro, November 6th, 1817. Today is something Brazil has never seen before.
Let me just turn this volume down because I don't want it to be too deafening.
A royal wedding. Prince Pedro I, son of John VI, has just met his wife, the Austrian Archduchess Maria Leopoldina. Now, they've already been married by proxy, but they have not met until this day of masses and festivities. Maria, clever and sincere, has prepared herself for this new world. She's learned Portuguese, her 7th language, and pored over maps of...
Hell. Oh my god, go on, Maria. Quite typical for, nobility in that period. Cool. So yeah, Pedro I, or Pete, as I like to call him en inglés. Pete the First, he is going to be a big player. So he is going to be, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to look really foolish if this isn't true, but I'm pretty sure he's going to end up being the monarch, the emperor, or the king. I'm not sure if he was a king or an emperor. I'm pretty sure. No, Empire of Brazil. Yeah, of course he was an emperor. So he's going to become emperor of Brazil, and he sounds like kind of a cool guy. But, I'm sure the picture is much more nuanced than that. Let's see if we can find out any more in this series.
Of the country. Fascinated by natural science, she's traveled from Europe with her collection of interesting minerals and brought new plants to introduce to Brazil. The Rio Maria sees is no longer a backwater. It's a city of universities and government buildings, today decorated in celebratory garlands and banners. People lean out of windows to cheer her, no longer a colony, but a kingdom. A kingdom she and her new husband, whose eye, even now, is already wandering towards other women in the crowd. Right. Despite John VI and his royal family's flight from Portugal, he remained a major figure in the imaginations of his subjects back home. After all, they...
What did that say? Was that still love him? Cool. Right.
flight from Portugal, he remained a major figure in the imaginations of his subjects back home. After all, they still had a king, even though he lived across the Atlantic and ruled from a colony. And as the Napoleonic Wars came to a close in 1814, and Portugal once again ruled itself, there was a hope that the man that his subjects...
Dom João. That is such a difficult way to... Oh, that accent, man. I'm learning Portuguese at the moment, and that accent is so difficult for, like, English speakers. I think, personally, in my experience, because it's such, like, a nasal, like, so... eles são lindos, or like Dom João, which I'm guessing means like Lord John, Don John. Oh, that's actually a pretty good nickname, Don John. But yeah, I think that, sir, I don't know, how would you translate Don? My favourite reverso context. Dom. From Portuguese to English. Gift. Okay, right. Don John. Oh my god, it actually says Don John. Keanu Reeves is Don John. Don Pedro is evil half brother. Anyway, sorry, I'm wasting so much time. Let's keep watching. Dom João will return. This is like a fairy tale.
Called Dom João would return to head the empire from his proper place in Lisbon. But John himself was not so keen on that. See, despite Napoleon's defeat and exile, things in Europe were not totally stable. The ideas of the French and American revolutions were spreading, and throughout Europe, people were arguing for greater personal rights, freedoms, and to constitutionally constrain the powers of monarchy and the church.
And that is the beautiful thing about the 1800s. Well, the beautiful thing, I mean, it was kind of fucked up time. But it's interesting how the, the demand for, I guess you'd call them liberal reform, where, like, it's more focused on rights of the individual rather than, like, the well-being of the worker. Because that's more of, like, a socialist thing, which is also more in the latter half of the 1800s, first half of the 1900s. When it was most influential. But yeah, it's really interesting. Sorry, I'll keep butting in so much. This is such a fascinating time period for me, so let me just shut up and keep watching.
Though French troops had vacated Portugal, they'd left these revolutionary ideas behind, which proved popular since Portugal was one of the last absolute monarchies on the continent. Indeed, when the great powers met in the Congress of...
What is this? This fucking, leg. It looks a bit like a... If you can see, it's just behind here. It looks a bit like a trotter. Who's this? This looks like the Founding Fathers. It's like elites in any country.
Of Vienna after Napoleon's defeat, one of their goals was to reinforce traditional monarchy and restrain this liberal explosion. Meanwhile, Portugal's oldest ally, Britain, was starting to pressure Portugal on its slave trade.
Wait, what does that say? Yeah, no slavery. Cool. Yeah, because in 1807... slave trade made illegal in the UK, and 1830? I think it's 1837. It's like 38 years... 38? It's like 30 years later. That's when slavery was actually abolished in the UK. But obviously, there are still a lot of different perfectly legal methods that continue to be used to oppress people. Especially, like, the Indians. Like the, South Asian Indians. Anyway, yeah, kind of a bummer. But yeah, come on, fuck the slave trade, stop it.
A situation John just had to accept, since with Napoleon gone, the British were administering Portugal as what amounted to a protectorate. So, between the specter of liberal revolution in Lisbon, the pressures from the British, and wanting to draw Brazil and Portugal closer, John decided to postpone his triumphant return to, later sometime, eventually. However, he couldn't govern from a colony. Instead, he elevated Brazil, declaring in 1815 that it was its own kingdom and that he was now the regent of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves. It was a stunning move, one that officially marked Brazil as more than...
Sorry, Sorry, this is so annoying. As you can see, this is literally in front of me. I can see myself watching. Right. Did he say...
And the Algarves.
Algarves. Oh, the Algarve, that's the south of Portugal. That's weird that that's a separate kingdom. Cool.
It was a stunning...
What is this? Like, I'm guessing something tells me that this is a reference from the American Office, which I have yet to see. But also, it kind of looks like that photo of Terry Crews. Well, he's more clothed, but you know that photo of Terry Crews in White Chicks, where he's where he's like naked and like he's lying there in the house, like with, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. If you're watching this, you guys have got good taste, right?
Move. One that officially marked Brazil as more than just a temporary seat of government in exile. Brazil wasn't independent, sure, but it was in the big boys club. Not a colony, but an integral part of the kingdom. All the economic, political, and trade restrictions meant to stunt Brazil's growth to ensure it did not grow to eclipse its colonial master were gone. And in both Lisbon and Rio, everybody knew the consequences would be enormous. But King John, and he was officially king after his mother died in 1816, would be forced shortly to choose between his two kingdoms. In 1820, troops in northern Portugal mutinied, and a liberal revolution broke out, spreading within weeks in a largely bloodless victory.
I didn't know that happened. That's very interesting. 1820s, what's going on in the 1820s? That's the start of the Monroe Doctrine, 1821. I think that's when, like, Florida becomes a state, maybe? I don't know, what's going on in Europe? 1820s is the end... is like King George? What's going on? Because 1837, you've got Queen Victoria. This is pre-Opium War, but post-7 Years' War, post-American Revolution. Very interesting, I think this... Anyway.
Spurred by anger at British command of Portuguese troops, the monarchy's lack of assistance during the war, and a feeling that Portugal was being governed like a colony from Brazil, the rebels had many contradictory positions, but all demanded John's immediate return. John, as was his way, remained indecisive. Liberal revolts were not new to him, with Brazil having experienced one 3 years before, when a bloc in the country's northeast, angry about the capital being moved to Rio, and their inability to get the king to consider local issues, briefly seized power. Now he'd put that down with force, but that wasn't an option in Portugal. Factions broke out in Rio. One faction insisted on the monarch's return to Lisbon, while another worried what that would mean for Brazil. Would their status be demoted? Without the unifying leadership of a monarch, would Brazil declare independence and break apart? And you know, that last one was a real possibility. It was already happening to Spain's American empire, with huge provinces breaking away from Spanish...
Oh, yeah, of course, right. Around this time, 1820s, I swear down, you have the Mexicans break away around 1811. I think it's 1811, 1820, around that time. You also have Simón Bolívar and like Gran Colombia and you know, the Latin American wars for independence and stuff. That's I completely forgot about that. I'm so dumb. But yeah, and also Brazil's varied, man. Like, and like the differences between the Spanish spoken in like, you know, the like all these silvery parts down here, Argentina, Uruguay, and like Chile is just something. Oh my god, Chile is just something else. But like the Spanish variations aren't. Well, I suppose yeah they do. They use vos rather than like vosotros and like ustedes and stuff. It's just the languages are pretty much different. Like someone from the Dominican Republic or like, you know, Puerto Rico, they speak so different to someone from like, you know, San Francisco or something. Anyway, yeah, very interesting, very interesting. I can't believe it. Sorry, this is so long, guys. I'm 15 minutes through and I'm only 420 4 minutes 20 through this video.
Spanish control and fragmenting into multiple countries. Courtiers tried to sway John. Would it not be better to be an absolute monarch in Brazil than a prisoner of revolutionaries in Lisbon? Ironically, though John was widely disliked, both Lisbon and Rio wanted him. Sure, he was indecisive. Sure, he'd abandoned Portugal, and okay, he did keep hunks of chicken in his coat pocket as snacks. But he...
What? No. There's got to be context to this.
...was a unifying figure, and there was only one of him. Unless... when Pedro was first summoned to his era was the chicken...
Stop. No, right, I keep fucking... in Portuguese, the word for chicken and strawberry is frango, morango. It's just... I find them so similar, I always get confused. I can't find anything. Maybe it's because I'm using Ecosia. I just want trees to be planted, guys. Let's see, if we're using Google instead. No, right, okay. Guys, I actually really need a shit, so I'm just going to go right now. But now, let's go to... Oh my god, right, I've just remembered, yeah. So he walks around and keeps bits of chicken in his pocket. I have no words. I can't verify that. So if any of you know if that's true, please let me know, because that is just jokes. Anyway, right, let's carry on. Vamos.
In his coat pocket as snacks. But he was a unifying figure, and there was only one of him. Unless... When Pedro was first summoned to his father's chamber, he was confused, because the two, to put it mildly, did not get along. While John was an absolutist, Pedro had an appetite for works of enlightenment.
So we've got Voltaire, Kuhn, Rousseau, isn't it? Rousseau? Pierre Bayle, I don't really know who that is. Doesn't ring a bell. Liberal constitutionalism, human rights, Thomas Paine. Yeah, cool. Don Pedro seems like a cool guy.
Philosophy that preached liberal constitutionalism. In fact, his wife Maria, herself a Habsburg absolutist, was known to sigh and say, Pedro, God help us, loves the new ideas. Besides, John had not raised him to rule. Pedro's eldest sister, Maria Teresa, was the one who advised their father and performed most of Pedro's state functions. John also disliked Pedro's playboy reputation. So Pedro must have been in shock, as his father declared that he would go to Lisbon to serve as regent of Portugal, while John stayed in Brazil. But the situation changed at the last minute. Portuguese troops mutinied in Rio, threatening to spread the revolution across the Atlantic. And while John was once again split with indecision, Pedro, though at the theater at the time, left and rode out with local Brazilian troops and brutally crushed the uprising. Maria, for her part, got on the stage after he exited and reassured the audience her husband was handling things. Days later, it was decided they would switch. John would return to Lisbon, while Pedro would stay as regent. Pedro, John reportedly said, if Brazil declares independence, let it rather do so for you, who will respect me, than for one of those adventurers. And you know, if he did say that, it was an eerily accurate prediction. Because when John arrived in Lisbon, the Cortes, an old parliamentary institution revived by the revolutionaries, forced him to sign the constitution they drafted. He was an absolute monarch, no more. Back in Brazil, Pedro was cutting government spending, lowering taxes, and guaranteeing basic rights. Mostly, though, in an attempt to fix the financial problems his father had left when he'd sailed off to Lisbon with most of the treasury. But he also battled multiple army uprisings, ending most through personal negotiation, but finally having to expel one Portuguese general. Meanwhile, in...
Wow. Pedro. So, he's good in bed, and he's good in government. Lad. Seems like a cool guy. Yeah, personally overseeing negotiations. I don't think you see Don John doing that. Would you? I don't know. Let's see. Meanwhile, at the Cortes.
Lisbon, things were not going well for Brazil at the new Cortes. Brazilian representatives showed up expecting to be treated as equals, only to find their concerns overridden and their kingdom mocked. Portuguese representatives insisted on turning Brazil back into a colony and giving Portugal a monopoly on its trade. The Cortes voted to dissolve the Brazilian government and force Pedro to return. Faced with this possibility, and handed a petition signed by 8,000 Brazilians asking him to remain, he stated his intention was to stay.
Yeah, because Pedro... I'm not being funny, but what are they going to do? Like, that's the difference between Portugal and Spain, is that Spain, like, Portugal didn't really have a hinterland. Like, there's a reason why they focused on the Cartite system and like took over islands on the way to India and Asia, like, and they didn't really explore Brazil's interior until well into Brazilian independence. Yeah, it's what they're gonna do. Like, nah, fuck them. You want to turn me back into a colony? No way.
Pedro continued to negotiate, but behind the scenes, he was gathering allies. One was José Bonifacio de Andrada y Silva, an able minister and a longtime supporter of both Brazilian independence and the abolition of slavery, though perhaps his most surprising ally was his wife.
Right, I must admit, earlier on when they were saying that bit about she says, like, Pedro loves the new ideas, I didn't realise that was Pedro's wife. I thought that was John's wife. Interesting.
wife Maria, who by now abolition of slavery. Though perhaps his most surprising ally was his wife Maria, who by now left her Habsburg teachings behind and became a budding liberal, pushing her husband toward independence. Also, Pedro began quietly visiting cities across Brazil with a small entourage in order to shore up his support before declaring independence, waiting for the Cortes to do something so offensive he'd have a strong hand. September 7th, 1822, outside Sao Paulo. Dom Pedro is riding an old mare with only 38 followers heading back to Rio. Ill with a stomach bug, he keeps having to stop the group.
That was me like 5.5 minutes ago coming back from the toilet. Fuck.
And dismount due to attacks of diarrhea. Yeah, the scene wouldn't really make for a very good nationalist oil painting. But that's where the messenger finds him and delivers the news. It is final. The Cortes will not accept any form of self-government for Brazil. It must return to its former role as a colony. Now, accounts of this moment differ. One says he picked the ribbon from his hat, the one with the Portuguese national colors, and throws it on the ground. Says he picked the ribbon from his hat, the one with the Portuguese national colors, and throws it on the ground. Another account said...
Oh my god, right, if you guys get that reference, because it's the Andy Samberg, Lonely Island, you know, the throw it on the ground.
That he is filled with rage at, in his words, Portugal's attempt to enslave Brazil. You know, a little ironic considering Brazil is the continent's largest slave economy, so yeah. Then, he turns to the little retinue and makes a statement. Again, witnesses record his words differently, but all agree on the final pronouncement. Independence or death.
Okay, so now we've got a minute and a half of adverts and stuff, which I'm not going to watch. But, yeah, morning bro, I'm broke, I can barely afford YouTube. But, yeah, good video, very good. I'm going to be watching the next one now. I just need to move my mouse around a little bit, lol. But, yeah, very good video. So, now we've been introduced to Peter, the king, well, the prince of John. And... yeah, it's kind of laying the groundwork for Brazilian independence because we've just ended on the cliffhanger of the revolutionary Cortes. I suppose it's Cortes in Brazilian, and it'll be like Cortes or something in European Portuguese. I don't speak European Portuguese. Yeah, but yeah, they've said that Brazil is going to have no degree of home rule. Like self-government, and it'll be going back to, you know, having to do everything through Portuguese monopolies, which isn't really going to go well because freedom is kind of like, I don't know, it's one of those things where once you give it, it's very hard to put back in the box, like Pandora's box. Like, you know what I mean? Like, imagine living in a country and being told, okay, you're free. Or like, for example, Haiti, after the French Revolution, when they were like, yeah, you guys aren't slaves now. Oh, actually, you are. And you know what I mean? Like, with Toussaint and... yeah, very interesting. But anyway, I'm going to be watching this next episode now. I might have to move something around and do something else first. But yeah. I'll see you guys on the next one. Adios.